Hello, class. These are our area of trapezoid notes for informal geometry. So remember with the trapezoid, we had one pair of parallel sides. And these parallel sides are our bases. And I'm kind of writing it above because I just don't think this box is going to be big enough for all of our information. So you can tell on this particular on this particular trapezoid, I just did parallelogram notes, so the word's in my brain now. So we have one pair of parallel sides, which are our bases. So on this particular trapezoid, you can tell that these are my parallel sides. So those are going to be my bases. This is going to be base 1. And so we're going to call it B sub 1. The second one we'll call base 2 or B sub 2. So it doesn't matter if you swap these. I could call this one base 1 and this one base 2. It doesn't matter, but these are our two bases. And our height always needs to make a right angle with our base. It needs to be perpendicular. So this would be my height over here. And the formula for area of a trapezoid is area equals 1/2 height times, in parentheses, base 1 plus base 2. Or we could write it as height times base 1 plus base 2 divided by 2. So we tend to write it this top way with the 1/2 in front, just because it takes up less lines on your homework. When you put divide by 2 like that, it tends to take up 2 lines on your homework versus like a small fraction, but they are the same thing. So I could just go through and multiply everything together and then divide by 2, kind of like I do with triangles. So the other thing we need to add here is bases and height must be perpendicular. So we can't forget about that. So that's the little note I want to add. And now you can see why I put that definition up above, because there just wasn't going to be space in the box. And I think I also want to show with highlighter, pink highlighter now, those parallel sides that are my bases. So for the first three here, it says for each trapezoid below, label the bases, base 1 and base 2, and then label and draw, if necessary, the height. So first, we're just looking at where are the parallel sides, right? So they're marked. This one's parallel and this one's parallel. Here, it's the ones on the right and left. So this is kind of a tricky trapezoid. It's almost like I'd have to turn my paper to get an idea of what's going on. And the last one, it's going to be top and bottom again. So those are marked for us with those little arrows to show that they're parallel. So I'm going to label those base 1 and base 2. So B sub 1, B sub 2. We tend to be lazy and just say B1 and B2, but remember they're subscripts. I'm not like squaring them or anything or multiplying them by 1 or 2. So it's just a way to identify the different bases. And then I want to identify my height. So my height needs to make a right angle with these bases. And I don't have anything here. This doesn't make a right angle. It's not marked as a right angle. And we know that the base and the height need to be perpendicular. So I'm just going to draw on my height. The second one is a little bit tricky. So I would really recommend on this one turning your paper so you can go, oh yeah, I need to make something that is perpendicular to both of my bases, that forms a right angle with my base. And then for the last one, I'll turn my paper back and I will mark my height again. And I guess I needed to label that middle one. So the height has to be perpendicular to the base. It needs to form a right angle with the base. And because of the way parallel lines work, if it's perpendicular to one, it's perpendicular to the other, right? So on the next two, we're going to work on finding area. And these area problems are a little bit longer today, so I'm going to definitely be using some of my space off in the margin here. So area will equal 1/2 height, base 1 plus base 2. You can tell I'm also writing really small. So let's go ahead and identify them. So it looks like this one right here in the middle, the 7 is that one that's making the right angle. So that's going to be my height. I don't think you can even really see that I colored that in. So the height's going to be 7. And then when I look at my bases are the sides that look like they're parallel. They're telling me it's a trapezoid. And this is making a right angle with this one. So that will be my bases on those two. On this problem, these are my two bases, the 7 and the 11. So 1/2 times 7 plus 11. So let's go ahead and multiply. 1/2 times 7 plus 11 is 18. And then there's a lot of different ways we could go about this. We could multiply these two, then multiply by 1/2. I wouldn't want to do the 1/2 times 7 right away because that would give me some fractions. I actually think for me, I'm going to multiply these two first and get 9 times 7. But any order you multiply in, it should be 63. And then because we have 7 meters times 18 meters, this is going to be meters squared. So on the next one, I can see that there's a little right angle mark right here. So that means the 14 will be my height, and the 16 and the 10 are my bases. And I can definitely see that the 10 is making a right angle with the 14, and these two look parallel. I know we can't assume things from geometry diagrams, but they're telling us it's a trapezoid. So we really can. This isn't like find the area of a whole bunch of things and now we don't know what kind of shape we have. They're telling us that we've got a trapezoid. So area is going to be 1/2 times the height times base 1 plus base 2. So the height is 14, so 1/2 times 14 times base 1 is 16, base 2 is 10, so 16 plus 10. So 1/2 times 14 times 26. So lots of different ways to multiply this. You could multiply really in any order, right? As long as you only use the 1/2 one time or the 14 one time. We could multiply these two first and then by this one. But however you multiply, you should end up with 182 feet squared. So when we're looking at area, our unit is always going to be squared, so unit squared. So for the last two, they're telling us that we have the area of a trapezoid, and then we're working to find the height in one and the base in the other. So I always like to start out kind of looking at my formula. So I'm going to write it off to the side here, because this is going to be a pretty long question again. And so my first one, let's see, I have my bases. I have my base 1, I have my base 2, but that height is what I'm looking for. So let's go ahead and write B1 and B2 next to these. And I have my area. So we're going to substitute everything that we do know. So instead of A, I'm going to write 77. Instead of my height is H, so I don't know that. I'm going to have to keep it as an H for now. But I can substitute for my base 1 and base 2. So base 1 is 8, base 2 is 14. So I have 8 plus 14. So I'm going to go ahead and add over here. And 8 plus 14 makes 22. And then it's really nice here. I can go ahead and multiply the 1/2 and the 22, and that's going to make an 11. So 77 is going to be 11 times whatever H is. So my last step here is just to divide both sides by 11. And I get 7 is equal to H. And because I have units feet here, this is going to be 7 feet. So my height is not going to be feet squared. It's just a distance. So a distance is not going to be squared. It's just 7 feet like you would normally measure like someone's height or the length of a table or something. So it's just feet. When we look at area, we're looking at like square tiles to cover something. And that's why it's squared, because we're looking for square tiles to cover. All right, on our last one, I'm going to write out my formula again. And this time I'm missing base 2. So it's really hard to read, but there is an 8 inside here. So the 8 is going to be my height. I've got my base 1 and I've got my area. So I'm going to substitute everything I know again. So instead of A, I'm going to write 84. My height is an 8. And then base 1 plus base 2 is going to be 13 plus B2. So that's what I'm solving for this time. And this one's trickier. It's inside the parentheses. So one thing I can do right away is multiply the 1/2 times 8. So that's going to be a 4. And I could distribute, but the other thing I could do instead of distributing is just divide by 4 right away. 84 divided by 4 is going to be 21. And then this 4 is gone. All I have is 13 plus B2, because 4 divided by 4 makes a 1. When I distribute 1, it does nothing. So that's kind of an easy way to get around having to multiply 4 times 13, 4 times B2, and working with all those big numbers. Dividing by 4 right away kind of reduces the way our problem looks. So now my last step is subtracting 13 on both sides. So 8 is equal to B2, and this is going to be 8 inches. So we are just looking for the length of something, so it's not squared, it's just going to be inches only. So hopefully this helps you with the trapezoid formula, and this is something for you to look back on later. Make sure you ask questions in class.